Hi everyone. I made a little presentation to go with my video tonight, and let me just pull it up. And just to remind everybody that I did my paper on autism, but I narrowed it down to teaching autism versus raising a child with autism. So what is autism? Autism is otherwise known as autism spectrum disorder, or ASD is the new term they like to call it to shorten it down. It is a neurodevelopmental disorder characterized by defects in a social interaction and communications with restricted behavior. Um, and I found this statistic that was really shocking to me. As of 2018, approximately 1 in 59 children um, is diagnosed with ASD. I thought that was really kind of high. And I read that typically boys are more diagnosed than girls are with ASD. And this quote that I found that really stuck out to me throughout my research was, educators should not assume that all students that have autism will like or even learn the same way as other students with autism. It's just kind of how we think about every student is different. Well, just because two students may have autism doesn't mean they're going to be the same, or they might not even like the same things. So you just have to get to know them and then go from there on what they like and how they learn. So some things I found about teaching students with ASD is using visuals. Students with ASD are known as visual learners, and so they like seeing picture cues. In a classroom that I work in, sometimes the teacher there has a lot of visual cues in there. And then since I recently found out one of my students is on the spectrum or considered on the spectrum, I've been using more visual things in his daily work just because he can read those easier than he can read text. Another thing is be predictable. Students with ASD don't really like change. So if something does have to change, try to give them a good, couple, whether it's hours or days in advance to let them know and so they can prepare themselves. In our school with the student that is high functioning ASD, I sometimes sub in the room when the teacher's gone, and if she knows ahead of time that she's going to be gone, she'll tell him so he can prepare and get ready for the change in teacher that's the teachers or just teacher that is coming in. Provide good language model because students with ASDs, a lot of them have some communication goals or things they need to work on, and so just listening to other people talk will help them. Teaching social skills so then they can interact with peers, other adults, not just like their parents or some family members, and then teaching them those social skills later on will help them advocate for themselves as they get older. And just treat them as students. Just because they're labeled with ASD doesn't make them any different than another student would be. Also, teaching students with ASD, don't give them too many choices. Fewer is better. If you have to give some feedback, be gentle. Just because sometimes I know with some students with ASD, some of them have behavior, and you don't want to say the wrong thing to upset them and make them frustrated and just kind of rock their day. Incorporate sensory breaks. And this could be anything from just taking a walk, getting a drink. If you have a sensory room, maybe there's a favorite thing in there that the student likes to play with. Something in my room is I have a sensory room with exercise equipment or like the yoga balls, and my student likes to sit on there and bounce on them. Sometimes he likes to play with my Play-Doh or my squishy toys. It kind of just depends on the day and his level of frustration or sensory input at that time. And always have some peer interactions, whether that's in the classroom or in the hallways, or sometimes just bringing other peers into your learning environment so they can get that social interaction. Raising a child with ASD, always be consistent and have a routine. Those kind of tie together, kind of like be predictable. If something's going to change, let them know ahead of time so they can have that time to prepare themselves. Rewards if they're learning a new skill at home, so maybe putting toys away or cleaning up their bedroom, always have that positive reinforcement so then they feel successful when they complete the task. Having safe zones at home, if they're having a rough day, maybe they have a special spot in the house that they like to sit at and just calm down and kind of take a minute just for themselves. Some kids with ASD, they can't or haven't developed that communication yet, so they have ways of communicating that are nonverbal. My stepson Oliver, he has a poster book kind of board thing at school with pictures on it, and they use that if he's just having a hard time communicating at that time. And they're also using it too to help him form sentences and get that communication that he lacks. And they said that it's been very successful. And when he comes to us on the weekends, we can definitely see that he's learning new words and he's trying to not only use his words, but use actions with it. To continue on, raising a child with ASD, understand the tantrums that come with them. Sometimes it's just because they're really frustrated because they can't get their point across, or they're just upset at something. And always have fun times because it's always good to, take breaks and stuff from challenging tasks if they're just getting frustrated. Find something fun and just kind of know their sensory. Do they need to take a break? Do they need to walk? Do they just need to have that input of something squishy, or just know that what they need sensory wise? The similarities between teaching a student with ASD and raising a child with ASD is pictures are always a good thing to have, especially if they're learning new communication and ways to speak. Just having those pictures so they can tie those two together, where something is and what the word is. Having rewards, even at school, if you have rewards after they complete, let's say they have a reading activity and they complete it, they get a reward, and then they get to move on, and they complete that, they get a reward, just so they can keep engaged in what they are doing. Sensories, sometimes if they're just too overwhelmed, then they start shutting down, and then having that sensory break or just something by them to help get that input of that sensory back. Always emphasize social skills, because later on in life, those social skills will help them, maybe at work with their coworkers, or just help them advocate for them as they get older. Safe zones, because if the student gets overwhelmed, you don't want them to lash out. You want them to have somewhere that they feel safe and that they can calm down and just kind of relax and take time to themselves. Some final thoughts. When I originally came into this research, I honestly thought that these two things were going to be separate. And what I think now, as I'm going in, coming out of this, I've noticed there's a lot of similarities. Honestly, I don't really think there's too much of a difference between them, because when you're raising a child, you're obviously going to teach them. And so they kind of just intertwine together. And as I mentioned, I chose this topic because of my stepson, Oliver, and we think that he's autistic. So I kind of just wanted to get to learn new skills to help him. And as I said also earlier, that I do help sub in the classroom at our school with the highly functioned autistic child. And then I found out that one of my students has ASD as well. And I'm just learning all these new strategies to help make them feel successful and make sure that they accomplish what they are set out to. There's that. And I hope you enjoyed that, and I can't wait to watch your videos. Thanks.